Speaking of taking care of yourself, this kind of segues nicely into prioritizing self-care in your life. What does that look like for you?
Apparently, I failed because I've been in bed with COVID for 3 weeks.
Oh, gosh. It's a good reminder of like, I guess there's more we can do. Oh, my gosh.
I do apologize for my vocal quality. It is not what it normally is, but at least I'm speaking. Yeah, self-care. And I really do take the time to be concerned about self-care, whether it's myself with simple acts like washing my hands or getting my husband to wash his hands, which is like getting a child to wash their hands. That's a full-time job over here.
I feel you on that. I feel you.
I must have missed a hand washing somewhere along the line. He brought this lovely germ home. But yeah, I think I've always been a person who cared about my health, but through different phases in life, there's been instances that arise where your health and self-care and wellness have kind of come to a higher level and a higher surface. And I've started paying a lot more attention to that.
Yeah.
In what I can do to, keep myself healthy, not just physically, but mentally too, and emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the practices that are really, you mentioned the washing the hands, because let's start there, people. Basic care. What are some other things that are filling for you, that fill your cup?
Well, as far as prioritizing self-care, I would say probably learning how to say no to people and situations that don't fortify me, where I know that coming away from them or working with them is not going to prioritize my self-care, where I'm gonna get out of that feeling unhappy and unhealthy, and that I didn't even do them justice as well. So that's a real tricky one, is to actually realize that it could be an actual person or a situation the person puts you in, where you need to somehow figure out how to back out.
Yeah. Boy, that's a big one. And I love the way you said that, and what doesn't fortify you, because I've mentioned this before, because this is one of my favorite things that a podcast guest has ever said, but our friend Valerie from Inner Solace Therapy, Rivera, last spring pointed out that when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So make sure that you're okay with both of those things. And that's a great way to check. And I think you just gave another great example of that doesn't fortify you, which goes beautifully into confidently setting boundaries, not being afraid to say no to those things that don't fortify you, knowing it will have an adverse effect on you. And like you said, they're not getting the best of you either. I mean, I think so many times we feel so compelled to say yes to everything that we forget that if we do and we're not feeling called to it, or we're just wiped out, they're not getting the best of us, which is not what we want to do either.
It's so true. And some of those characteristics that you read, where I am a dependable and a reliable person. So when I say yes, either to myself or someone else, well, then I'm committed. And so then you can't back out, no matter how annoyed or unhealthy it's making you feel. So yeah, you've got to really stop ahead of time and assess it, which it doesn't seem like it should always be a process, and it isn't always a process, but at times you need to make it so that you know that when you do commit and you say yes, it's going to be a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such good points. Anything else you want to say about boundaries? Is that something that you've always been comfortable doing, that yes and no, or did you have to grow into that?
Yeah, I think I did have to grow into that. I think as you grow up and get older, you start to know what your needs are.
Yeah.
A lot of times through younger life, we just wander about doing what we're supposed to do and what we think we're supposed to do, and not really think about what are my needs. And then realize also that those needs are not static. They're not going to be the same needs that I have today that I'm going to have maybe next week. And then to somehow define them so you can actually put them into some type of words. And I think the most difficult part about setting boundaries is communicating them, because you have to do them effectively, however that looks. Generally we try to figure out how we can perhaps dance about them and present them to somebody else in a delicate way. And often that's probably the best route to go is not to jump up and down like a crazy person. But then sometimes that actually is effective, because if people aren't listening to you, if you just jump out of who you normally are and act like a lunatic, they're going to pay attention to you. And you just say, you know what, after all this time, at this point in time, I can't do that anymore. That's not acceptable. I will not be put into that position. And hopefully, that person respects you. And then finally, I think you have to be consistent, which again is a hard thing to do, because you could say, yeah, that doesn't work for me anymore, until it happens again. And then you go along with it. And then that person has kind of lost the faith in what it is that you said.
Yeah. And the intent and the commitment to it. Yeah. And it can be hard, because if people are used to you showing up in a certain way, and you change gears all of a sudden because you realize it's not serving you or your health or your well-being, you're used to saying yes. So it can be hard. It's hard to get that nervous system and that brain and those habits to shift. And also communicating that and being consistent with that, it's difficult to do. But I love how you said, don't be afraid to jump up and down and scream. You are deserving of being heard. And again, it goes back to when people aren't used to you showing up in this new way. Sometimes they don't like it. Yes. Or they're just not used to it, or they think, she doesn't really mean it. She was just wore out today. She'll come back around. No, sometimes you gotta tell them a few times, and sometimes you gotta kind of pound your fist a little bit on the desk to be like, no, I'm serious. And I need you to respect that. So thank you for saying that, because I think that is something important for us to remember, that we have a right to make a statement about that and to set those intentions that are best and healthiest for us. And if people cannot agree or come along with that, then maybe that's just not a person or a group that we need to be connected with at that point. And that's okay.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about taking care of your emotional health and your physical health. Talk to me about your journey with that.
I guess, again, as a younger person, I never really thought about emotional health because I grew up in a happy place and everything was pretty safe and comforting. And so I never had any kind of negative kind of emotional feelings that I had to deal with. Obviously, then as you go through life and you get married, you have children, and then you got to look after your parents. That's when at least for me, these emotions rise to the top, and you realize, oh my gosh, I've got to think about this, because as I said earlier, I've always been thoughtful about my physical health, but the emotional health. And when that hits you, it's like, oh my, what do I do with this? And so I think what I try to sort through is when I'm feeling fuzzy or weird and I'm just not really sure why I don't feel right, I try to stop and take time to notice how I'm feeling and figure out, what is it that's making me feel that way? And the best way I can come to that realization is just get up and go outside. Just be outside and breathe in and look at trees and look at the sky and, talk to a flower or whatever. Just get away, I think, from the physicalness of being in the house or your office or wherever, just to get outside. And I think that does so much for everybody's emotional health.
Yeah, he did. The power of a little sunshine or the breeze or just the smell of the fresh air is really, I think we underestimate the power of that. So important just to get some clarity and change. Sometimes you just need to change your space and get out. So I love that as an anecdote to that. I think that's wonderful. Also, I really like how you pointed out, I think sometimes when people look at this podcast and some of the talking points they have, sometimes people think, oh, I haven't had any real, I had a great childhood. Life's been good. I don't really need this. And what they don't factor in is like some of these things are going to come up in different seasons in your life. It may be a difficulty with a child. It may be caring for parents and changing roles with them. And all of a sudden, all these emotions are coming up. or something surprising happens with a coworker, or, there's just various things. We're all going to face something like it. So don't wait till you need the tools. Have the tools in your toolbox and ready. I made the mistake of waiting for a long time. So for those people, no, not to doom and gloom, but things are going to come up. Have those tools ready and be ready to share them with other people as well. But you bring up, sometimes those things don't come up until later. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay. This is a new narrative. This is a new season. And you've come up with those tools. So this doesn't have to just be for the big dramatic things that happen. These are the everyday life things, but also the new things that happen in new seasons as we change and we get older and different things start happening with people we care about, or, in our job spaces, whatever the case may be, changes in relationships, all those things that come into play. So I think that's a really good reminder too.
Thank you. Yeah, that hit me really hard when my mom went down with a medical situation in 2008, and I ended up taking care of her for about 8.5 years, and that's when my emotional health was just tested to the limit, to the point that one day I was supposed to be at the hospital because I spent like 24 hours a day with her for 4.5 months at the hospital. I could not move. I was like, literally my body was paralyzed in bed. And I called my husband and I said, you know what? I called him into the room. I'm like, I've got to go to the hospital. I might be having a heart attack. I don't know what's going on, but I physically cannot move.
Wow.
And that's when I really realized that it really wasn't a physical thing. It was all the emotions that, and I just kept going, kept being there and showing up and not taking care of my emotional health. So,
That is such a great example of what can happen and the connection between the two. And not a great example in a good way, but a great example of this has impact. This matters. If we don't address these things, they will show up and rear their head in a way that's not so comfortable and not so good. And it can be scary, at times. And so, those things and that's just your body. And sometimes we have this narrative in our head that our body is failing us or our body is letting us down. Your body is letting you know it needs attention. Mm-hmm. It needs some help. It needs some care. And so I've had to really switch my narrative in my head on that. And I think that's a really good example there of what can happen when we don't address those things and take the time. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's something we can all learn from and just be a reminder of have those tools in your tool belt so you're ready, so you don't get to that point. Exactly. Hardships. Absolutely. I have those examples of my own, so I relate to that wholeheartedly. But, that's why we're here having these conversations. Right. Just invite people into this and let people know that we don't want them to get there. And how are we going to help make sure that doesn't happen? You do this so beautifully. I feel like in the dictionary and next to this statement or phrase, it says Patricia Rullo, because, supporting ourselves and other women and living unapologetically. You are such a great supporter of ours. You reached out to us. You have honored us with your wonderful awards, and you can go to our website and learn more about that. But more important than that, that was wonderful. And I loved that. And it's the Positive Change Podcast Award. It was what your award was about. And it was what that you thought we were worthy of it that meant so much to me. Because it's like, because of the kinds of awards there are, because of the kinds of topics you address, it's one of the most affirming experiences we've ever had. And you do the same thing for authors with your Firewood Book Awards. You give these authors a chance and a voice, and then you give those of us that are involved with you a chance to sponsor those authors. So not only have we been honored to be honored by you in the podcast awards, we've gotten a chance to sponsor a Firewood Book Award, and I got to meet, and she's going to be on the podcast along with you this spring, Pooja Shah, who's the author that we sponsored, that was the winner of her women's issues category. So many wonderful things have happened since you reached out to me about 9 months ago. And then you take So we each get a chance to sponsor. You take that sponsorship money and you give to this wonderful foundation who takes care of women and children in such a beautiful, just basic needs kind of way that we don't think about. That's so powerful. So everything you do is wrapped up in empowering and lifting up and making space for and supporting. So I say all that to say, at what point did you decide this was important to you to live unapologetically and to support others in doing so as well?
Oh my gosh. Thank you for all you just said. I so appreciate you. And I so appreciate that you did sponsor that book category. That means a lot. I think it brings a lot of attention to the topic that you sponsored, women's issues. We had a lot of people get involved because of that. And it was an honor for me to then promote you each week through social media and to, have that connection with you as well. I always say this to everyone. Every author interview, every Firebird Book Award, every podcast person I meet, none of them do I ever feel are just random people that just came in and entered the Firebird Book Awards. It's never an entry. Mm-hmm. It always becomes a friend or a relationship or a conversation. And I just never feel that any of those just randomly, it's almost like the universe kind of puts us all together here. And I do consciously take advantage of that by continuing the conversation with people via email or however, or on social media to say, you know what, you entered your book. I sent you a confirmation letter, but it's not over. How can I help you? How can you help me? How can we further this relationship? And so I think by doing those kind of things, you become a role model without being obvious about it, without hitting somebody over the head with it,
Yep. Yeah. And you invite other people into it.
Yeah. Well, now I call it the Firebird family of friends because that's what it is. And so everybody gets intertwined. And I'm so happy that you're going to have her on your podcast later this year. I see again, that's somebody you didn't know. She didn't know you. And we don't know where that's going to land. Just the joy that one person brings somebody else. Yeah. And I was very lucky to meet Terry Grail, who runs Enchanted Makeovers. Mm-hmm. She was a homeless little girl herself and had a difficult childhood. And someone opened up a church to them and created a home for them and her family. And so that's always been on her radar for her whole life's work. Mm-hmm. And I had been making pillowcases with my mom. Once she got out of the hospital, she was so disabled that she couldn't do anything. So she started making these really beautiful pillowcases. And every day I'd go over, spend time with her, and she'd hand me 10 pillowcases.
Wow.
Mom, what are we supposed to do? We only have so many beds and so many pillows. That's when I decided to contact Soldiers Angels.
Yeah.
And they started accepting our pillowcases. We were making military ones specifically for them. Yeah. And they were sending them to the troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. And eventually I helped them set up their own pillowcase project. And it became such a fun thing. I got a note from some sailors out at sea. I think they were in the Persian Gulf, where they took the first pillowcase that they got and they holded up the flagpole.
Oh,
and all these guys were climbing up the flagpole to try to get the pillowcase. So it just told me that it's such a simple little thing, but that it means so much.
Yeah.
And then when they pulled out of those areas, then we started bringing them to local women and children's shelters.
Okay.
And again, that's when I met Terry, and she had an existing pillowcase project in place. And I just thought, how cool would it be to send pillowcases and books, children's books? So a lot of times when authors send their manuscript, they'll send it via email. But if it's appropriate, sometimes they mail them. So then we send a copy of their book. Often it's signed, and send it with this really fun, beautiful pillowcase. And so now you've got people going to bed at night, sleeping on a gift that they don't know where it came from, but they do know that somebody out there cares. And on the flip side of that, when I go into my sewing room, everything disappears and my focus is like, does that match? How does that color go with this one? And I'm so excited to make them, thinking, again, I'll have no idea who will receive these, who will sleep on. Just the whole anonymity of that whole project just warms my heart. So when I formed the Firebird Book Awards, I thought, I'm including this, including it with the podcast awards. It just has to be part of everything we do. And it's been so well received.
I got chills just warmed my heart to think about that. It's just such a good example of what it doesn't have to be this big, flowery, expensive thing that you do. It's that little thing that you do and the difference it makes. I mean, think of those people, at service, at sea, in very scary situations at time with the military, and getting that something from home, something that knowing someone's thinking about them, that they haven't been forgotten. And the same thing now for these, for the Pillow Project, for these women and children, these people who hit hard times, and they're knowing that someone loves them, someone wants them to have a pillow to sleep on, and a pillowcase that is endearing and reminds them that are not forgotten. There is so much power in that. Oh, I love that so much.
In fact, Terry calls it the traveling pillowcase project because when you lay down to go to sleep, you can travel to better places and to sweeter places and to safer places. So, yeah, it's extremely powerful and simple. Yes.
Oh, I love that so much. There is your subscription right there, listeners, today for those things that you can do. And this is how Pat shows up in people's lives. It's just really beautiful. Thank you so much for giving the background and history. And that's so powerful and such an important reminder of what we can do and that we can all do it in some way. And just, I love that anonymity piece too, knowing that someone somewhere in the world today is receiving this gift and is knowing that they're cared for and loved, and how that spreads. And that can be a moment for people, to realize of their value and their worth and to give them the hope they need. It's just, can't underestimate the power of that act. Oh, thank you so much. So good.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak about it.
Absolutely. And don't worry, all this information about Pat, what she's involved in, what her work, is connected to, is going to be on our resources page on our website, embracinglayers.com. So you'll have access to all of this. And podcasters and book people out there, you're going to want to know this too. So you can follow Pat, so you can submit your work, so you can be part of this journey too. It's really a beautiful thing. The importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values and everything you do. You have a pretty clear-cut understanding and you've gotten there, but talk to me about how your why and your values play into your boundaries, your expectations that you live out of, the things you say yes and no to.
I think I've always been attracted to teaching, to my poor brother. He was a classroom of one, and I was the teacher.
Oh, I love that.
I made him do all kinds of weird assignments. But anyway, it started out early about being so interested to teach, because I think teaching is inspiring, and I've taken that with my patient safety radio shows and my healthcare safety books and speaking on those topics to guide others to become informed so that they could make positive changes in their lives.
Yeah.
It's so hard to make a change or to become empowered or to stand up for yourself and your boundaries if you're not informed. So that's kind of always been the underlying theme, I think, of my whole life, is teaching, inspiring, and guiding others to become informed, to make positive changes. And so by doing that, I think it's empowered me to stand up for myself and take my own advice, I guess you'd say.
Right. And now, are you finished with the book? You're working on a book regarding those healthcare things right now, aren't you? Or did you just finish one?
Yeah, I just finished. That's out. My first book was called Speak Up and Stay Alive. It came after my mom's healthcare journey, where I was just having such a hard time dealing with all of the wrong that happened. I thought, I've just got to write this out, put it on paper, just a cathartic kind of thing. And it morphed into a book and speaking events, and it morphed into my radio shows.
Yeah.
Then I wrote several other healthcare books, an anthology, Highway to Heart, Humor and Honesty in Healthcare. And this last one is the one with the banana peel on there. It's called Healthcare and Hospital Hazards. And those are transcriptions from my patient safety radio show.
Wow.
About different and real events that happened to my mom and myself. Just as a way to show people these things do happen.
Yeah.
And you do need to become informed, because you can't be in a healthcare situation and make a positive change if you don't even know what can happen or what can go right or what can go wrong. So that's, again, where the teaching and inspiring, it just seems to follow me.
Yeah, it is. And it's, it helps you to know what questions to ask. You know, what things to be curious about, what things to watch for. That's important information. We can't make changes in anything without that information. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that for a minute. And again, that information also on our website, folks, at embracinglayers.com on the resources page. So don't worry, but I wanted to give Pat a chance to talk about that because it's really important. And it's such an unknown. And when you get into these situations sometimes where maybe you just haven't been involved before in the healthcare of a loved one, and even what to know and what to look for and what to be aware of, what to be weary of. Because that's just the truth of it. Those things, it's not a perfect system. And there's things you need to know and need to be aware of so you can be as safe and well as possible for yourself and for that family member that you're advocating on behalf of. So,
absolutely. So important.
Living out of your own expectations versus others. Talk to me about your expectations journey. Is that something you've come across to me as very solid in that? Is that a place you've always been able to be pretty comfortable in, or is that something you've had to work through? Because that can be challenging as a woman in the world in doing the kind of work you do, just period, as a woman.
Mm-hmm. That's really an interesting question. I think, just based on my upbringing, my mom and my dad, especially my dad, who not only had high expectations, but even if perhaps I might not have reached that expectation, he was there and say, Patty reads 10 books a day and she can do this. And he was always that cheerleader there. So I feel like I've always had high expectations for myself. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to, again, some of those characteristics where I'm reliable and dependable, not so much always for other people, but more for myself. If I say, let's say for my husband, I tell him, I'm going to paint the front door this summer. Now, whether or not I paint it or not, he's probably not even going to remember I said it. Nobody else in the world is going to know I said that. But I'll tell you what, it could be September 20th. The front door will get painted.
Falls tomorrow. I still got a day.
Exactly.
I said I'd do it, and I'm doing it. No,
I am that person. If I say I'm going to do something, and I say it to myself, I've given myself that expectation that it's going to get done, and I do it. So, yeah, that's not something I've ever struggled with. I've not even ever felt that it's been too much either, because you could have so many expectations of yourself and then not meet them. Maybe I'm just too dumb to know that. I just keep getting up and going.
Well, I think you said something really important, though. You talked about how your dad early on was always supportive, was always your biggest cheerleader. And it starts there. When we know our parents are for us, our caregivers, our guardians are for us, and just proud to see us be alive, doing what we love doing, that sets you on the right track. So that you're not feeling like you've got to do anything different to please them, affirm them, receive love from them. You're accepted exactly how you show up in the world to them. So then that gives you, I think, the confidence and the belief in yourself to go out and live out of your own expectations. And you feel confident setting those, and you know you're setting them from an authentic place, not trying to please somebody else. And that it started way back then, I think.
For sure. I agree with you. I agree. And sadly, that's not always the case. Yeah. So how to answer that question if you didn't have that kind of background, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, and that good for you. That's a beautiful thing, but also speaks to the power of it. And I think it's something that it's really important for us to remember. The impact that has and the difference it makes. That's such a testimony to that. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves, all those parts of us that we're made of, all of the good, the beautiful, the complex, the ugly, the hard, the tired. Talk to me about accepting your layers and the ability to do that and just value and love yourself as you are.
Again, I love that question because it makes me think that the layers can change and evolve, that they're not always the same layers. And I think a lot of people might expect that, oh, wow, my layers are changing. This is what I was interested in before, or who I thought I was before. I may not be now, and I'm evolving as a person. And I think that's actually such a good thing to realize that there is that evolution, and, you can peel back those layers, and, just like peeling back an onion, each onion, it's not going to be the same all the time. And that's okay. It's not going to look the same or feel the same. And, so I don't worry about that. I just figure this is where I am today. This is who I am today. And I like it.
Yeah, I love that. I like it. That is a beautiful thing to be able to say and feel it, like it in your bones, like it's not something you're trying to convince yourself of. And that's so important, and it's so powerful to remember that, as we peel back those layers, it makes space for more. It makes space for expansiveness and getting to know ourselves more and what we have to offer in that season of life. Because it's going to change, and that's okay. It means you're growing and learning and evolving, which is what we're here to do throughout our lives, to show up as our most authentic selves. And you do that. You just show up so authentically to people. So thank you for sharing that. So good. In summary, in living out field, finding empowerment, embracing layers, talk to me about how that affects your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with others.
Okay. Well, I'm fine with my relationship with myself. I don't.
Yes.
I love myself.
Which I love.
How does it affect relationships? It does. I mean, in good ways, in not so good ways. I mean, there's certain people that it could actually scare some people away.
Sure.
If they feel like here's a person who knows who they are, what they want, where they're going, even if they don't know where they're going. I mean, they come across that way, and keep moving in that direction, and don't back down. That's going to scare some people away. But more often than that, I think it may cause more people to respect you more, to learn from you, kind of silently learn from you. Mm-hmm. Again, how I said before, where you're not being obvious, you're just doing your thing. Yeah. And there's always people around who are watching.
Yes.
And you may not know that. And they may run away. And I guess if they do, that's okay. I mean, it's just probably not a person that needs to be around.
Yeah.
So, because that goes back to your question. Are you going to, how do you accommodate how other people have expectations of you?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, just to feel strong in who you are, to find that empowerment and embrace it. I love the title of your podcast, because that's really what it's all about, finding empowerment. And there's a lot of steps to find it.
Yeah.
Becoming educated and learning, and then once you find it, not running away from it and saying, this is me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, if you don't like it, that's, this is who I am. Obviously you can smooth out some of the rough edges to be palatable to more and more people. But at the end of the day, as long as you're not doing anything wrong or bad, it's okay to be you.
It is. Absolutely. And I love that. And you're going to attract the people that are meant to be in your circle that value you as you are and want to celebrate that and lift that up. And for the people that are bothered by it, like, one, we're not going to be for everybody. That's just the way it is. But two, for those people that it is maybe off-putting to, then they're either just not ready to go on their own journey and they're intimidated by it, or they don't know how to move through it because they're not in that space yet in their lives. Or it's going to be an invitation like, oh, I want more of that. How does she do that? And so, I mean, I love the stance that you come from with that. I think it's so healthy and so grounded. So thank you for that. So, so good. We are down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Okay. First, I would say kayaking. I live on a river, and my backyard has a dock, and I keep my kayak out there. So anytime I need to just get out of my head, I get out in the kayak, and it's a different world. The same kind of idea. We have a lot of pines on our property, so I so enjoy just walking under the pines and thinking about forest bathing, where you just let all of the energy from the trees just surround you and bathe you. And the same with the river. It's a little bit of a different feel to walk along the riverbank, but to look into the water and watch it swirl, see little fish, and just notice things that not many people have an opportunity to see unless perhaps they're on vacation or something.
Sure.
And so, those 3 things really help me just to get outside. Then I have 13 cats that found me. I was extremely allergic to cats my whole life. And one showed up on our back deck, and the mother left her there. And I thought, whoa, now what do I do with this little kitty? So I was feeding her, and one day I went out and just touched her and didn't get hives, didn't break out. And I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. So I brought her into the garage. Then I brought her into the basement. And then I brought her upstairs into the main part of the house. And the mother obviously thought, well, this is pretty cool. And she kept having babies and leaving them on my deck until I was finally able to do the TNR and bring her to get spayed.
Yeah.
But I still have her. So I've got these 13 characters that have just changed my life. When people talk about rescuing animals, these little people rescued me. They just took my heart and smushed it all up. And so, that nourishes me. And business wise, we talked about that through the book and podcast awards. I like making other people feel good about their work by offering them platforms where they can shine and give them a reason to say and feel validated, and then continue that relationship on. So those are 5 of the top ones. How's that?
Well, and you do that beautifully. You absolutely do that beautifully. And I love that I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and lived there a lot of my life. I'm now back on the West Coast in California, close to both an hour and a half from 3 national parks and 2.5 hours from the ocean. But growing up in the Northwest, I grew up in the west side of the state of Washington. I was just used to, you get out every morning and you smell the trees. My house was literally among the trees.
Yep.
And then moved away and lived in other parts of the country and realized that that's not everywhere. And so whenever I get back to the Northwest, the first thing I'll do when I get out of the car is I take a big, deep breath in and just inhale the smell of the evergreens around me. And it really is just so edifying. And I love lakes and rivers, and a day on the lake or a day on the ocean or a day in the mountains are like my favorite ways to spend it. It is so powerful. So when you said that, you talked about the pines and the being out in the blanket of forest, I could literally smell the trees as you were saying that. It like put me back in that place. So thank you for that. I love that. It's so good. All right. And 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Well, after feeling horrible for the last 3 weeks, I would like to feel healthy.
Yes. You have started 2024 with the wrong kind of bang.
Exactly. I'll tell you what, though, healthy should be on everyone's top list, because if you're not healthy, you can't. There's nothing else.
Right.
You can't
move
get out of
from
bed.
there.
Yeah. So healthy is number 1. I would say fulfilled. I always want what I do to fill me. I want to feel energized by all that I do. In these very, very strange times, I look to feel hopeful.
Yeah.
I look to try to find hope in the future. And finally, and that takes me back to the kayaking and the pines and the river and the cats and making friends through the podcast awards. My last and most important one, I think, is grateful. I like to feel grateful, and I do that outside. I go out and I have a huge cottonwood tree, and I just say, thank you, cottonwood tree. Thank you for letting me live here. Thank you that I feel good today. Thank you for my cats, my business. And, I talk to this tree. So those are my top 5 for the 5 words on how I want to feel for the next 6 months or forever. How's that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Why stop at 6 months?
Exactly.
Let's live that way forever. I love that. Oh, Pat, thank you so much today. Thank you for making time. I know you're not feeling well, so this means so much to me. I really appreciate it. Tell people real quick, and again, this will be on our resources page on the website, embracinglayers.com, but tell people real quick how they can follow you and find your work.
Yes. The best, quickest, easiest is speakuptalkradio.com. And from there, then you can find us on Instagram and all social media sites. So that's simple. Before we end, I have to thank you for who you are, for what you do. And you are an awesome, awesome host. You take this conversation and make it yours, make it ours. It's all melded together. You do a beautiful, beautiful job. So my hat's off to you, Melissa. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Pat. That means so much to me coming from you. I cannot even tell you how much that warms my heart. And I appreciate that so much. And that right there, people, that is who she is in the world. And we are also lucky to have her, know her, go to that website, follow her work, nominate your things that you love for her work, nominate those books, nominate your podcast, nominate your own work. Don't be afraid to speak up for your own work and do that. You won't be sorry. It's such a beautiful community to be a part of. And you're going to meet just these people you would have never known otherwise. And I can't tell you what value it's going to bring to your life and your experience when you're doing those things that you love and you get to meet these incredible people. So again, Embracing Layers, podcast followers, VO podcast followers, Embracing Layers radio show. We've got so much going on right now. I can't even name it all, which is a good thing. We are so thankful for all of you for being here with us today. We hope that this has really given you a great lens and some tools, and just being fed by Pat's ambience and confidence in what's possible in the world when you follow and believe in who you are and fight for those things and stand up for those things. And she's such a great example of that. So I'm hoping you felt as inspired by that today as I did. We hope you have a great week and that you just get outside, smell the trees, listen to the river, take in a breath of fresh air. So powerful. Pat, thank you so much again for being with us today.
It is my pleasure. You're a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Right back at you. All right, Field Podcast audience, have a great week.